I'm excited to introduce you to today's speaker, Katie Anderson.
Yay.
I was first connected with Katie at last year's AME conference, and over the course of the year, we have stayed in touch, and I've learned that she has so many great topics and experiences to share. Katie is the facilitator for AME's Bay Area Consortia. She's also a faculty member of the Lean Enterprise Institute and Catalysis. Katie has held senior lean leadership roles at Stanford Children's Hospital and the Palo Alto Medical Foundation. She speaks and facilitates around the world, and after living in Japan for a few years, she now leads annual study trips to Japan to share her insights about lean thinking, the Toyota way, and Japanese culture with other leaders. Katie, I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, I'm really happy to be here virtually with you all. I'm located in the south of San Francisco near Stanford University. So I'm calling you from my home office today, and I'm really looking forward to being up in Portland just in less than a month now, and hopefully getting to see many of you there in person. So I have a picture of a Daruma there for you. I'm a bit obsessed by them, and I'll talk about what they are at the end, but it's a sign for goal setting, and I want to challenge you at the end of this for setting your own goal about how you are going to improve as a coach or leader based on something that you've learned from today. So the point of today is really to talk about not just how to be an effective coach for problem solving, but I like to add the word how to be a more effective coach, because this is about how we get better each and every day. And to me, the fundamental thing that we all need to work on, regardless of what our role is how we balance this continuum of telling versus asking. And if I were in a room with you all right now, I'd say, what do you think is our typical habit? And people generally say our habit more is to be on the telling side of the continuum versus the asking. And it's true. It's not that telling is wrong or bad as leaders or as coaches. There's absolutely a place for teaching, for setting direction, for giving information, but it's that our habit has tilted so far that direction that we have lost so much of the skill for asking questions and really helping other people think for themselves. So when Jennifer was talking about what would be the topic for today, I was saying how much I experience for myself as well as when I'm coaching and developing others, how we have this challenge between showing up as an expert versus showing up as a coach. So, so often in our careers, we are promoted because we have deep content knowledge or expertise, regardless if we're independent contributors or if we're becoming leaders in an organization, and we have been recognized for our expertise. But the challenge as we get more senior in our companies, and frankly, even in our lives with the people around us, is that when we show up in this role of being the expert, of being the problem solver, we end up owning the problem. So as we have more responsibility in our organizations, when we end up owning all the problems because we're coming in and telling people what to do all the time, we are not actually creating capability for problem solving in the organization. It can feel a little bit faster at times, or that you know what the answer is, but we have to be more aware about what's our purpose in the moment, to own our own expertise, or are we there to be developing the capability of other people and therefore broadening the ability for people to solve problems. And when we end up owning all the problems, well, we become the bottleneck and overwhelmed, and it creates a bad situation. So why do we need to develop capability for other people? It's because we really need more than just one or two people solving problems across our organization. There's a great book written by Edgar Schein, who is a professor emeritus of MIT, who studied organizational development. He wrote a book called Helping, saying that we all have this inherent desire to help other people. In one way is to show up as the expert, but that when we do that, we really don't allow other people to have their own ownership of the problems in front of them. And so if we show up in more of this role of coach, or what he called process consultant, we are more effective at doing that. To me, this gets back to a concept of connecting with our intention, about what is our purpose and our role in that moment. Is this our problem to solve, or actually is this something that someone else has the problem ownership of? And then do we need to come in with our content knowledge and expertise to solve that problem or take ownership away? Or are we there really in a coaching and supportive role? Jennifer mentioned that I moved to Japan and lived there for a while, which I did in 2015 and 2016. I'm going to tell a quick story that doesn't relate necessarily to coaching, but it really relates to what I'm going to talk about a little bit later, which is how we connect and lead with purpose and intention. I didn't have a business card at the time, and I asked the business card company maker to put the logo, just the Japanese word for intention on my card, which is the symbols you see in front of you. And I started handing it out to Japanese people, and those who spoke English would always say, "Oh, this is a very powerful word." And I say, "Yes, I find that intention is really important." They said, "No, there's something deeper meaning here." Then I learned that the symbols here, the one on the lower part of the one on the left means heart, and the one on the right means direction. And to me, I've come to really see that intention is a way that we connect with our purpose, what's important inside of us, and the direction, how we show up, what behaviors we take, what actions we take, what words we say, and how are they aligned with that purpose. So when we go back to thinking about, are we wearing the hat of a problem? Do we own the problem, or are we the coach of the problem owner? That gets back to our purpose in the moment. Are we there to solve the problem ourselves and just be fast and move, or are we there also to create some capability and confidence in other people? So then the things that we do differ based on what our purpose is in that moment. So having that awareness of what is our role, what is our purpose, and then what are the things that we need to do to align with that purpose. So I have 7 things that I've put together, 7 sort of more practical tips and tricks about things that you could do to become a more effective coach of problem solvers in your organization. This is not an exhaustive list, and of course we'll go into many more things in the workshops in the future, but here are things that I offer for you. So the first is to take an intention pause. And actually it was really great. I was on a coaching call this morning with a community in the Netherlands. I do some group coaching, and a woman came back and said that this comment that or suggestion I'd made at a workshop a month ago in the Netherlands has really changed how she is showing up as a coach and a leader. So she commented today that how so often she's running from meeting to meeting, and sometimes she is the problem owner, and sometimes she's actually the coach. And we get so fast in what's happening in our daily lives that we forget what our role is, what is our purpose in that moment. And by taking even just 10 seconds, 1 minute to connect with, okay, what is my purpose in this next meeting? What is my purpose in this session here or this interaction? We can better connect how we show up to align with that purpose. And I have found this to be very helpful for myself too, grounding myself in my practice, and really, am I there to dig into that problem and to be the owner, or do I need to show up in a different way? And there's some other tips here on how you might show up to be more effective if you're trying to coach. So the second is to pay attention to the quality of your questions. Edgar Schein says that if we are in a coaching role, this process consultant role, the most effective thing we can do is ask questions. Most of us know that as coaches, we need to ask questions, but not all questions are created equal. This very strange looking animal is actually a wolf dressed up as a sheep. And more often than not, and I challenge you to pay attention to the quality of your questions, we are asking leading questions which are really telling people our ideas or suggestions of what to do, rather than asking a true humble inquiry question for which we do not have the answer to. What if you tried my great idea, or have you talked to so-and-so, or whatever it is? This is not a humble inquiry question. And I encourage you to really think about what's coming out of your mouth. And if you catch yourself asking a leading question, something that could be answered as a yes or a no, or you're asking multiple choices, to pay attention to that and think, how could I reframe this as a question starting with what or how? Now, granted, some of those questions can be disguised as a fake question too, like, what if you tried my great idea? But typically, if we ask a question starting with what or how, it is more likely to be a question that we don't have the answer to, and is going to be more on that asking end of the continuum rather than the telling end, hidden as a question. The third recommendation I have, and we all know that we should be listening, but not just to be listening with open ears, but to be listening with open eyes, an open mind, and an open heart. We often filter what we expect people to be saying or doing, but if we come from a place that we are truly there to see and learn and help that other person, so to go back to our purpose and our intention, to really hold the space for them to think and to express what's going on in their minds. And then we are able to ask more effective questions based on what's going on for them. So to have the openness to receive what people are experiencing, what they're thinking, and what they're struggling with. The fourth trick or tip is to ask a question before answering a question. So this happens all the time, and I catch myself immediately. I really want to tell people, they ask me a question, and especially when I'm facilitating or I'm coaching, they're expecting me to have the answers. I'm the expert in front of the room. But more often than not, you'll be surprised that if someone asks a question, they either have the answer inside themselves already, or they will partially answer the question for themselves. And when we jump in and give immediately our idea, we take away some of that confidence and knowledge for themselves. So asking a question to get deeper understanding of that person's thinking can be helpful for you as a coach and can be helpful for the other person. So for example, someone asks a question, I will respond and say, well, what's one idea you have about that? Or what is one thing that you have tried so far? I get to learn more about the context of why they asked that question or some of the thinking they have. And then I'm able to assess really, do they need more help? Do they not have the knowledge? Or they actually start talking and find that they've answered the question in part themselves. So it's not about always just staying and asking questions, because at some point that if someone's really stuck, continuing to ask questions actually does a disservice and is not aligned with your purpose in that moment. But we make the assumption that people need to tell us more than they actually do. So try asking a question before answering a question. The fifth is to, especially when we're regard to problem solving, help people challenge assumptions. So we assume we know a lot, but we make these assumptions and help people understand, are they really validated the facts of what's going on? Some questions I learned this comes from Toyota, a lot of their deeper reflection. So what do you actually know and how do you know it? What do you need to know and how can you learn it? These are really powerful questions because we often assume that we know what the problem is and we assume we know what the solution is. So there's something I've been incorporating into my facilitated sessions more and more lately. It was something that I learned from Karen Martin, who wrote Clarity First and some other great books. She's another fabulous lean thinker and coach. But a simple way to help people understand problem-solving thinking without going into deep content analysis or talking about A3 thinking or other problem-solving frameworks is to have someone divide a piece of paper and just label one side problem, the other side solution, and write down some problems that they're experiencing and then brainstorm a bunch of solutions already on their mind. You can then do a quick teach about what a process is, what a root cause is, how we need to look at causes before jumping to solutions. And this can be a really interesting thing to do, because then you can ask someone to say, okay, take a paper and divide it into thirds. And now title one, problem, the middle one, possible causes, and the right side, possible countermeasures. And without doing much teaching on root cause problem solving, people will get the ahas that slowing down a little bit and starting to think a little more deeply of this middle portion of what are some of the causes to the problems that are presenting to me, gets them thinking a little bit more deeply, truly into problem solving. And then the things that they come up with possible countermeasures often is a bigger list and is different from what they'd come before. And this can be a really interesting way to talk about and highlight how we jump to conclusions. We assume we know what a problem is and we know what a solution is. And just slowing down a little bit can help us think more deeply. So little coaching tip for you there. The sixth one is to be frequent. We tend to batch our coaching of other people. So we have to have an hour block once a week on the calendar. And I've been experimenting with doing more frequent, shorter coaching sessions. And this is something I learned from my friend Karen Ross. Checking in 15 minutes about what did you plan? What did you expect to happen? What did you learn? Helps people get into this habit of problem solving, of the plan, do, study, adjust cycle. Rather than waiting for a week or two, we're helping people do shorter cycles and turn that plan, do, study, adjust wheel. So the more frequently you check in as a coach, the more frequently you're helping develop that habit of problem solving thinking. And the 7th is, as a coach, to seek feedback. For example, asking a process question such as, how was I helpful today? Or what was a helpful question can serve 2 purposes. One, it gives you feedback as the coach on, really how you're performing and supporting that person and developing their skills. And 2, it helps the other person think more deeply again. I have found that when I ask this question, if people start talking about the question they found most helpful, they start talking a little bit more and diving back into the problem solving. And so it actually helps them continue on the problem solving cycle. And again, I want to get back to what is problem solving thinking. It goes back to just scientific method and turning this plan, do, study, adjust cycle. We can use many frameworks like A3 thinking, if you've heard of that. Many people are practicing what's called the Toyota Kata. These are all patterns of helping people practice scientific thinking, both as learner and as coach. So what's actually happening? What's the gap? What should be happening? How are we going to adjust to close that gap? What's our plan? What are we going to do and test? And then what did we learn? And it's this difference between what we expected to happen and what actually happens, where that learning is. So as coaches, how can we give people space for that thinking? And how do we ourselves not jump in telling all the time and therefore cutting out that opportunity for the learning for the other people? And when we show up just a little bit better and more coach-like in our everyday interactions, we'll be surprised at how much more thinking and the richness of thinking that happen in our organizations. I want you to set your intention about one thing that you're going to practice with intention or more intention over the next 30 days to improve as a coach or a leader. I have many of these, and for those of you coming in December, I will have some mini Darumas to hand to you to set your own goals as well. This is about perseverance, fall down 7 times, get up 8. I don't want to do it on my hand here, but this is weighted and it will always write itself. So know that you're not going to be perfect, and that's okay, and nor will your learners, but it's about continuing to practice and continuing to get better and paying attention to what's your purpose in the moment. What hat are you wearing? What is your responsibility? Are you problem owner or are you coach? And then what are things that you need to do to best align your actions with that? So we're going to ask on the poll, what is one word that you are taking away from today? And you can put that on the poll later. And I want to open it up to some questions. I know we have about 10 minutes, 9 minutes here. And I know this is a lot of telling for me, so I'd rather ask, what questions do you have? And let's have a dialogue.
So go ahead, and there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if you've got some questions for Katie, go ahead and type those in, and the 2 of us will broadcast that and answer for you. While people are typing, Katie, do you want me to launch the poll about their intentional coaching?
Sure, that would be great.
So while we're waiting for a couple Q&A questions to come in, I see some starting to pop in. We're also curious about how you would describe your daily intentional practice with coaching others. So on the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to select and vote, and we'll give you a couple seconds to do that.
Yeah. All right.
Just still ticking up there. Just a second.
All right. I see some of the questions popping up now, so maybe
Yeah.
I'll go through some of that. I see Pam White asked a question. Do you have a favorite go-to question when the learner says they don't know what their next step is? So that's a great question, Pam. I don't have like a specific go-to question, but I usually would try to ask a question, for example, what have you tried so far? I like to say, like, what is one idea that you have? Because sometimes people get very overwhelmed with all thinking that they have to come up with everything. But if you put it down to just, what's one thing, one idea, and then you can really hear where they're at. There may be times when someone is really, truly stuck that you might offer up a suggestion, but you really need to see evidence of some thinking and some being stuck. And then label if you're going to give a suggestion instead of asking a leading question. Say, I'm going to put a teaching hat on. I want to give you an example about how I might approach this, or what something I've done before, or that I know that, Bob has a lot of information on this topic. You may want to consider talking with him. So I'd say I'm putting, a teaching hat on, and then I'll say I'm going to put my coaching hat on. So what do you think about that? So that would be one way that I would deal with that. But I don't want to just immediately assume people need my advice.
Do you want me to share the results of the poll real quick, and then we can jump back to Q&A?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions here. Great.
Yeah, they're starting to pop up. So just really quick, we'll put that on the screen.
All right, cool.
It's like most of you fall right there in the middle.
Yep, that's great.
There's some good practicing.
And that's, I would say the continuum of practicing the mastered is a long continuum. I put myself sort of between practicing and mastered, because it's typically intentional, and I try and do it every day. And the thing is, it's not about how we show up just at work or at home. As we put more intention to how we're showing up and connecting more with our purpose, you'll find it goes over all parts of your life. In fact, my mother, who's a therapist, so I grew up in a very asking questions kind of family, said about 8 years ago, when I started really putting a lot of work into my coaching, she said I became a better listener, a better daughter, you could tell I was a better mother, because I was slowing down, listening more, interrupting less, and really asking much more effective questions. So stay on the path and keep trying. All right, so I'm scrolling down some of these questions here. Oh yeah, okay, this is a good question here. How do you balance the frequent coaching check-ins with sustained demands in a production environment? So I'm continuing to practice with this myself, and it doesn't always work perfectly, but usually you can find 10, 15 minutes to check in with someone rather than trying to find an hour-long block on a calendar. So, the way I do this then is we just look at our calendars at the end of the 15-minute coaching session and say, all right, in 3 days, I'm going to come back in when, or 2 to 3 days, when's the time? We just stay in touch that way. So it can be sometimes easier to find shorter periods of time than trying to find a big chunk. Someone said when I'm coming to Portland, I'll be Portland the first week in December. So come to that session that Jennifer is organizing, and hopefully I'll be back in Portland more than once. There's a great question here by Jeff Mason. If you are coaching other coaches, how can you help them recognize the difference between being the expert and the coach? This is great, Jeff. It's a lot of the work that I do, in both when I led internal process improvement teams as well as what I do now. And it's about helping the people in a role called coach understand that they play a few roles. One is, teaching and providing structures for learning for people, in knowledge and information around, process improvement techniques, but also getting awareness that when they come in and behind the scenes are doing all of the problem solving, that they're not then actually delivering on their greater purpose, which is developing capability in the organization to solve, broader problems as well. So having someone be what I call a second coach, helping coach that person on their coaching skills, can be really helpful too, and to help hold up that mirror about what's happening in the moment. If we have only, a cadre of 6 to 8, Lean Six Sigma black belts who are coming in and doing all the master problem solving, when that person when they leave and go on to the next project, there really hasn't been sustainability. And so it's really having that dialogue with the people who are in a role called coach to help them understand what is their expertise and where are they then teaching and coaching and developing other people. Lots of great questions. Let's see. Sorry, I'm reading all those. There's one. Have you, Adam said, Epperstein says, have you found there are common reactions or learning behaviors which require different coaching styles, similar to styles of learning? So yes, absolutely. The way you need to have rapport with the person that you are coaching and have established some relationship, and even if it's not a formal contract, to have talked about what your role and the expectation is, and even having some upfront conversation about, how do they like to receive feedback? What are you going to do as a coach? And making sure that there is some understanding there, because if you just come in and start, asking a bunch of questions, or, holding up the mirror is also part of a coach's role. So helping someone practice something new, that can be very off-putting if there hasn't been some conversation there. And then the role of your coach is to definitely be true to speak the truth with candor and respect, but people can receive things in different messages. And so my energy changes a little bit based on the people that I'm working with.
Why don't you take one more really quick, and then we will wrap this up. So we're pretty much at the end of our time together. And then we can see if we can answer a couple of questions maybe behind the scenes.
Or I know, I'm trying to see what are the other ones. Okay, it is difficult to change from telling what to do to asking what to do. And do you have any tips on how to make this mindset change? Yeah, my first tip would be to start just creating awareness for yourself of when that's happening and what happens as an outcome of that. And then really start even just trying to, in a small, like 1 or 2 situations a day, start thinking, how could I ask this question opposed to telling someone my idea, and experiment with what happens as a result of that. Okay.
Great.
Awesome questions. There's a whole list here. I'm so sorry I haven't had a chance to answer or like explore all of them, but I really hope to see many of you in Portland, and we can always set up some more time as well to do some future coaching or dialogue as well. So here, Jennifer, I know you need to change here.
Yeah, let me.
So the Women in Lean, Women in Leadership, come be with me in person. I'm really excited. I also want to put a plug in for those of you, Women in Lean. There's a LinkedIn group too that has a lot of these conversations. So it's #WIL.